Today we are traveling to the forest of Fontainebleau. Here we go. Here there is a massive 30-kilometer radius of sandy beaches that are over 3 hours drive from the nearest ocean. How did they get there? The more I investigate this sandy mystery, the more I realize that Fontainebleau has a deep history. Come along for the ride. Between 24,000 and 9,000 years ago, tribes of prehistoric people made this forest their home. Scientists have found over 2,000 shelters from that period. In many of the sites there are engravings that show different hunting scenes, or even there was one carved in such a way that looked a little bit like a female anatomy, if you know what I mean. But it was carved in such a way to allow for the moisture in the area and the humidity in the rock to come out of this engraving and produce fresh water. Amazing. I do live in the area now, but I still remember my first visit to the forest. The ferns that completely cover the ground in the summertime. You see just a little bit of rocks popping up here and there, covered in moss. And the silence. I mean, compared to Paris, which is just a chaotic mess, the forest is so silent and so calm. And in the morning, there's even a mist that covers everything. It's really magical. And the forest really is quite large. I put a little representation here on my map. It's about 30 kilometers in radius. So imagine all of that sand. How did it get in the middle of France? We came to the forest for the sandstone boulders. That's what it's really known for among the climbing population. When I touch the rocks, I think about how they've been here for millions of years. They have seen so much. And the curved shapes show the different elements that they have weathered. Their famous rippled appearance make us wonder what they have seen. And who has seen it? The forest was loved by generations of kings. For centuries, there was a hunting lodge in this place known as the Belle Eau, a name that over time became Fontainebleau. The medieval hunting lodge was first called a palace by Louis VII, who was a very young king of only 17. But Louis and successive kings adored the castle and its surrounding forest. They loved it for the same reason I love it, the natural beauty. And of course, their love of hunting wild game, I guess, like boar. They claimed the water in this region had medicinal properties, which, considering what a mess the sewage situation in medieval Paris probably was, I'm sure that Fontainebleau, which was situated upstream from Paris, was a real improvement in the water quality. In the 16th century, François I, who was known for his building projects, took up the task of adding on considerably to the castle. At this time, Renaissance art ideas were spreading throughout the French kingdom, but François I was the first real strong patron of the arts, and he had a vision for a center of Renaissance arts in France based out of Fontainebleau. King François I felt that the medieval traditions of wielding power through war and conquest were barbaric. He wanted to show his wealth and power through art, gardens, and castles. He did so by sponsoring Leonardo da Vinci, who was then in the later stages of his life, and a few other Italian artists to move to France. He commissioned them to create lavish interior decorations in his castles, frescoes, and sculptures. And Leonardo da Vinci became the king's #1 painter, engineer, and architect, which at that time was a real title, I suppose. The Mona Lisa was even on display one time for the king and his guests. And just take a look at some of these murals, especially the ones in the chapel. I think it's just astounding. Especially, you can compare it to the Sistine Chapel, I suppose. They're both really beautiful, and the Sistine Chapel is important for its own reasons, but this is equally as beautiful, and definitely the work is on par. It is a tribute to the birth of Renaissance in Europe, and it definitely deserves a visit. At the moment, they aren't allowing video, so I don't have a lot of video for you guys to see. I took a lot of these images from the castle's website, because actually in the chapel itself, you're not allowed to go. Like, you can see it from a distance from 2 different angles, but you're not allowed to go into the chapel itself, which is really too bad. And I would like to go back when they do open it up to the public, because this is, like, looking at these images online, they're really amazing. To me, Fontainebleau is the most interesting castle that I have been to in France, because it really does have these 2 eras sitting next to each other in the same space. You have the mahogany, medieval, geometric cut wood and furnishings, and then at the same time you have the Renaissance works, the frescoes, the sculptures in every corner, the works in the chapel. It's amazing, and you see them really sitting on this same plane, and you see that evolution through the creation of the different decor in the castle. And on top of that, you have all of these different time periods that you can really witness their evolution, from the medieval parts of the castle to the renovation of Francois I, to then the Napoleon era, which I haven't gone into at all, but Napoleon also made this his palace. There's just lots of history here, and I love the castle for that. But the staircase and many of the building's foundational blocks, the cobblestones, and of course all of the garden sculptures all used the local sandstone that's found in the region. Which brings us back to our original question. For a place that is in the middle of a continent, how and why is there so much sand? And I mean, there's really a lot of sand. You can go to places where it's a whole desert of sand. And in some areas, the boulders are really dense, some they're more scattered. So I've done some reading about the geological origins of the region, and there is a lot to read. Definitely have a look at the links below to read the articles for yourself. The general idea is that around 30 million years ago, there was an ancient beach in the middle of what we know today as modern-day France. This region is slightly closer to sea level than Paris and the rest of this area here. So you can imagine that maybe this part here was all underwater. More recently, researchers have argued that due to the shape and the way that the rocks break in some areas, it indicates that this whole area was buried after it was an ocean, and then it was pushed to the surface around the same time that the Alps were formed. Which is an interesting theory, and it does sort of make sense, because if these are the Alps here, and as you travel up this way, it becomes it becomes more and more hilly, right? And this is really the last hilly area before it's just like massive plains. There is a lot to understand about these rock formations, such as why do they have a tendency to form strange little bubbles like this that people collect and put in their gardens? To understand that, we need to understand a bit more about what the rock is made of. To do that, I visited a quarry where I learned about the rock, but also about the history of mining sandstone in Fontainebleau from this lovely man, Monsieur de Ellevière, who was kind enough to let me come and take pictures of him and his crew. He told me an interesting anecdote. Apparently, the sandstone has been extracted in this region for a very, very long time. But during the medieval period, the iron that is used to make the hand tools to cut the stone was a very limited resource. You see, the kings needed it for their military needs, swords, jousts, and whatnot. And stonemasons and everyone else had a hard time getting the iron to make their tools. It wasn't until the Renaissance period when Francois I ushered in this revolutionary idea of investing in beautiful buildings and gardens to show off their wealth and power instead of waging wars, that finally the stoneworkers were given the tools that they needed. At that point, the stonework became more efficient, but also more intricate and more precise. Another interesting anecdote is that in the 12th century, King Philippe Auguste decreed that all of the cobblestones in Paris must come from Fontainebleau. Many of them had been replaced by now, but originally they all came from the Fontainebleau region. And there are really three reasons for this. One reason is that the stones could be easily brought on boat from Fontainebleau region to Paris, which is just down the River Seine. Eventually, they even installed a system of railways that brought the stones directly to the river. The second reason for this is because the stone is extremely hard. It has a hardness that's close to quartz. It's 99% pure silica. 100% pure silica is quartz. So this makes it very hard to cut. Again, going back to those iron tools that they need, and they're worn out quickly. Like within a matter of minutes, these iron tools are no longer sharp. It also made it really resistant to the wheels of carriages, which were covered in a bit of sheet metal. The third reason is for its color, because it had a pure white when it's freshly cut. Walking around Fontainebleau, we think of the stone as gray because it's been exposed to erosion and dirt and whatever else. But it's actually a brilliant white, and it was revered by the king and the aristocracy at the time. In the 16th and 17th centuries, there were hundreds of quarries open and cutting stone at a snail's pace to supply Paris with cobblestones and foundational blocks for buildings, historic buildings, as well as castles, cathedrals, churches, and mansions all over France. Today, most of these quarries are now abandoned and covered in foliage as they were ordered to close when the area became a nature preserve. But just outside of that nature preserve, there is one still open and operating, and only using hand tools to shape this very hard and very beautiful stone. The white color of the stone immediately captured my attention as a photographer. It's just so beautiful, and the incision of the hand tools, watching the men work in this slow process to break off a big, huge chunk of rock, and they're trained to the sound of how the rock reacts to their tools, because depending on how it reacts, it denotes the quality of the rock, but also if it's ready to give way and if it's going to fall on them. So they listen for the piff, puff, poof, which are the three different qualities of the rock. They have worked on a long list of famous historical monuments, including the cobblestones in front of the Louvre, the Chateau of Versailles, the Cathedral of Chartres, as well as many important foundation blocks in mansions across France. Over 6 million visitors come each year to walk in the forest, visit the castle, and experience some of the magic. As I said before, among the climbing world, it's really known as the birthplace of bouldering, because these boulders were originally organized into like a chain of problems for alpinists to come and train on in the summer months. And this type of training eventually became its own style of climbing, which we know now as bouldering. Basically, the difference between bouldering and regular climbing is, are you going to use a rope? And at the end of the day, are you going to stand on a mountain or are you going to stand on top of a boulder? If you're standing on a boulder, then you're bouldering. And today we think of Fontainebleau as the birthplace of bouldering. The sandstone's unique texture with waves and ripples over the surface of the rock create an interesting texture to hold on to, and interesting holds that you really can't find anywhere else. The fine grain allows for a subtle friction between the climber's shoes and the rock. This friction is not easily mastered. I can speak from experience. It's not easy. It really does require a mastery over the rock itself, because you have to understand how it reacts when you push on it, the friction, how your shoes are going to react when you step on it. It requires a lot of confidence in the friction of your shoes on the rock. And that's something that really takes a lot of time to acquire. So that's why we decided to move here, was to be able to spend more time on the rock. Now, if you decide to come to the forest, which I highly recommend that you do, you should also spend time in the gardens around the castle, and as well as in the forest itself. Just like in Versailles, the gardens are world-renowned. Actually, the Fontainebleau garden is not only unique for its many beautiful sculptures and its various grottos, but it is also the largest French-style parterre garden in the world that spans 14 hectares, which is about 34 acres. It's huge. So bring your walking shoes, bring a picnic, or even better, rent bikes, because you get to see everything faster. So if you guys like the video, stay tuned, there's more on the way. Next up, I am taking a trip to the birthplace of France. If you have any ideas of where I might be headed, put them in the comments below. And also check out my Patreon page if ever you want to buy me a coffee. Stay tuned, see you next time.